The rain fell hard against the tall windows of Ashford House, each drop sounding like a quiet goodbye. The house that once rang with laughter now felt hollow, stripped of warmth and pride. The walls were bare where family portraits once hung, taken by creditors who showed no mercy. In the center of the drawing room stood Lady Elena Ashford, her hands folded tightly before her, her back straight despite the weight pressing on her chest. She was 24, far too young to feel this old. She had once dreamed of love, or at least of choice. Instead, she now stood facing the Earl of Blackwood across her father's empty desk. The dark wood was scarred with rings left by countless glasses of whiskey, silent proof of her father's slow fall. Those marks told a story of despair she could never forget. The Earl was everything she expected, and more. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in black from coat to gloves, he looked carved from stone. His hair was dark, his face sharp, and his eyes were the gray of a winter storm, beautiful in a dangerous way. He did not remove his gloves, not when he entered her home, not even now. It was as if he feared touching the ruin that surrounded her, or perhaps feared something deeper. "I require a wife," he said, his voice calm and cold, like words read from a contract. "You require rescue from social ruin and debtor's prison." Eliana lifted her chin. She would not shrink, not now. "This arrangement would be simple," he continued. "You would bear my name, manage my household, and appear beside me when duty requires. In return, you will have financial security." Her fingers tightened together. "And marriage?" she asked softly. "All that it usually means?" The Earl's jaw hardened. A muscle jumped beneath his skin. "I will never touch you," he said. The words fell heavy into the room, final, unmovable. "You will have your own rooms, your own life," he went on. "I require an heir eventually, but that can be arranged or not at all. My line may end with me. I care little." The cruelty of his honesty stole her breath. Yet she heard something beneath it. Pain. Old and deep. She had heard the whispers. His first wife, dead 3 years. A man who locked himself away with grief and never returned. "I accept," she whispered. 2 words sealed her fate. The rain continued to fall. Neither noticed that both their hands were trembling. His hidden inside leather gloves. Hers lost in the black folds of her mourning dress. The church bells of St. Michael's rang days later with all the joy of a funeral song. Elelina stood before the altar in an ivory gown borrowed from the Earl's stores, likely once worn by his first wife. The thought made her skin prickle, but she did not falter. Adrian Thorne stood beside her, stiff and distant. His answers to the vicar were precise, empty of warmth. When the moment came, he took her hand without removing his glove. The leather between them felt like a wall. The guests filled the church with whispers and judgment. "A business arrangement," someone murmured. "They say he keeps his first wife's rooms locked," another replied. Elelina heard every word. She stood taller. When they were pronounced husband and wife, Adrian did not kiss her. He only inclined his head, but in that moment, she saw it in his eyes, not indifference. Fear. They traveled to Blackwood Manor in separate carriages. The house was vast and dark, filled with silence that pressed in from every corner. Mrs. Phillips, the housekeeper, led Elelina through endless halls to the east wing. "His lordship's rooms are in the west wing," she explained. "He thought you might prefer the morning light." Helena stood alone at the window that night, watching the sunset over unfamiliar gardens. She understood perfectly. She had married a ghost, and he had given her a beautiful prison. The weeks passed quietly. Elena learned the manner as one learns a foreign tongue. Slowly, carefully. She ate alone, read alone, walked alone. The house was grand but sorrowful, filled with portraits that watched in silence. She saw Adrian from a distance, walking the grounds in the early morning, working late into the night, always alone. They spoke only when required. Polite. Distant. She found the rose garden hidden behind a stone wall. It had once been loved, now it lay wild and forgotten. She began to tend it, clearing dead growth, coaxing life from tired soil. She did not know Adrian watched from his study window, breath held tight in his chest. The garden had been his first wife's sanctuary. The library became Elena's refuge. On a rainy afternoon, Adrian found her there reading poetry. "You may read what you wish," he said quietly. She praised the book without thinking. Pain crossed his face before he could hide it. She loved poetry, he said. Roses too. Then, as if the words tore free against his will, he spoke of his wife, her death, the guilt that crushed him. Elenina listened without judgment. "Adrian," he said suddenly, "not my lord." It was a small crack in a great wall. She began placing roses in shared rooms. Said nothing of it. Noticed his habits, his tea, his preferences. He noticed too, though he never spoke of it. Music returned to the manor one evening. Elenina played the pianoforte he had locked away. Adrian stood hidden in the hall, listening as memories stirred painfully to life. Something shifted that night. She saw the suffering of the tenants and spoke up. Adrian resisted, then listened. For the first time, he saw her strength. Estate work became a bridge between them. Conversations grew longer, dinners less lonely. At a grand assembly, cruel words were spoken. Adrian defended her without thought, his gloved hand resting at her back. In the carriage home, their bare hands touched by accident. Neither forgot it. Winter drew closer. Walks became shared. Silence became companionship. Yet he never removed his gloves. One afternoon, he nearly reached for her hand, then stopped himself. She saw the fear win. That night, she wept alone. December arrived heavy with storm clouds. His sister warned her to abandon hope. Adrian swore he would never love again. The storm came with terrible force. Adrian rode out into the night to protect his people. Hours passed. Then his horse returned alone. Elenina did not hesitate. She ran into the storm. She found him crushed beneath a fallen tree near the river, barely alive. With strength born of love and desperation, she freed him and dragged him to shelter. Through the long night, she kept him alive with fire and care, whispering promises she refused to break. As dawn broke, Adrian opened his eyes and saw the woman who had saved him. And nothing would ever be the same again. Morning light crept through the broken shutters of the old groundskeeper's cottage, pale and weak after the night of terror. The storm had spent itself, leaving the world washed and quiet, as if nothing terrible had happened at all. Inside the cottage, the fire burned low, its warmth barely holding back the cold that clung to stone and damp wood. Adrian Thorne woke to pain. It pulsed through his leg, sharp and constant, and his head throbbed with every breath. But pain was not what stole his breath. It was the sight beside him. Elenina sat slumped against the wall near the hearth. Her dress was torn and stained with mud. Ash marked her cheek. Her hair had fallen loose, framing her face in dark waves. Both her hands were wrapped in rough cloth, already soaked through with dried blood. She slept sitting upright, as though she feared that if she lay down, he might disappear. Memory returned in broken pieces. The storm, the falling tree, darkness. Then, her voice, her hands, her strength pulling him back from death. "Eleanor," he whispered. She startled awake at once, pain flashing across her face as she moved. "Adrian," she breathed, "you are awake. Thank God." She leaned over him, checking his breathing, his wounds, her movements sure despite her exhaustion. "You saved my life," he said hoarsely. She shook her head. "We saved it. Now we must get you home." By mid-morning, the grooms found them. Adrian was carried on a makeshift litter, Eleanor walking beside him despite her injuries. At At Blackwood Manor, the physician worked quickly. Adrian's leg was set and bound. Laudanum dulled the pain and pulled him into sleep. Eleanor lingered in the doorway until Mrs. Phillips gently urged her to rest. Only then did she retreat to her rooms, where she finally allowed her body to feel what her heart had carried through the storm. Days passed. Adrian remained confined to his chambers. Eleanor's hands were treated, bandaged properly now, though the pain lingered. She waited. She hoped. But when Adrian finally emerged, pale and leaning on a cane, something had changed. He thanked her formally for her bravery. He nodded politely in corridors. He returned to his study. The warmth of the cottage night vanished like mist. Eleanor told herself he needed time. That fear did strange things to men like Adrian, but with each passing day, the distance between them grew sharper, more painful than before. She had seen his heart laid bare, heard his confession spoken with tears. Now he was pretending it had never happened. The roses in the garden wilted under early snow. Eleanor stopped playing the piano. The house felt hollow again. By the seventh day, she knew she could not live this way. She found him in the library at twilight. He stood at the window, cane in hand, staring out at a world he refused to enter. "We must speak," she said. He turned slowly. His face was guarded, controlled. "This cannot continue," she went on. "What you said in that cottage, do you deny it?" Pain flickered in his eyes. "I was fevered." "No," she said firmly. "You were honest." She spoke then, her voice steady despite the storm in her chest. She told him she loved him, that she could not live as a shadow in his life, that she wanted truth or freedom, but not this cruel half-existence. "If you do not love me," she said quietly, "then I will leave." Adrian broke. Words poured from him like blood from an old wound. His first wife. Her death. The guilt he carried like a curse. His vow never to love again. "I loved her," he said, shaking. "And she died. I will not kill another woman with my love." Eleanor crossed the room and took his face in her bandaged hands. "Loving is not a crime," she said. "Fear is not safety. You are not protecting me. You are burying us both." Her words reached him where nothing else had. He saw then that his walls had not saved him. They had only kept him alive without living. "I choose you," he whispered at last. Their first kiss tasted of tears and relief, of courage found too late but not lost. That night, Adrian moved into Eleanor's wing. The house breathed again. Winter passed softly. Love grew slowly, carefully, with respect and trust. Adrian learned to touch without fear. Eleanor learned to hope without shame. When Eleanor discovered she was with child, fear returned, but this time Adrian did not run. He stayed. He prepared. He trusted. Summer brought their daughter into the world. Alive. Strong. Beautiful. Adrian held her with shaking hands. "Hope," he whispered, and in that moment the past finally loosened its grip. Blackwood Manor bloomed again, not just with flowers, but with laughter and life. Two broken souls had chosen love over fear, and it had saved them both. Winter loosened its grip slowly, as though it were reluctant to release Blackwood Manor from its long season of sorrow. Snow melted into dark earth, and the first green shoots pushed through the soil Eleanor had tended with such care. The house itself seemed to change with the land. Curtains were drawn back. Fires burned not for survival alone, but for comfort. Laughter, once unheard, began to echo softly through halls that had known only silence. Adrian healed in body long before he healed in spirit. His leg mended under the physician's watchful care, though he still walked with a cane for some weeks. Eleanor stayed close, never smothering, never retreating. She understood now that love for a man like Adrian meant patience, honesty, and courage in equal measure. At night, when sleep refused him, she would sit beside him and speak quietly of simple things. The gardens. The tenants. Books she wished to read. Slowly, the darkness loosened its hold on him. He learned that love did not demand perfection, only presence. They spoke often of Catherine, not in whispers, not with guilt. Adrian told Eleanor of the woman he had loved first, of her laughter, her gentleness, her strength. Eleanor listened without jealousy, understanding that Catherine was part of him, and always would be. Adrian learned that remembering did not mean betraying the present. Spring arrived fully, and with it came life renewed. The rose garden bloomed in colors so rich they seemed almost unreal. The tenants' fields grew thick with promise. Children once thin and coughing now ran freely through clean yards and dry homes. Blackwood Manor became a place people spoke of with warmth instead of dread. Then came the day Eleanor felt the first flutter within her. At first she thought it was nothing, fatigue perhaps, but when the truth became clear, joy and fear tangled together in her chest. Adrian's face went pale when she told him. His hands trembled where they rested over hers. "I am afraid," he admitted honestly. "So am I," she replied. "But we are afraid together." That was the difference. Adrian spared no effort in preparation. Physicians were consulted, midwives carefully chosen. Every precaution was taken. But alongside the fear grew something stronger: hope. Months passed. Eleanor grew round with life, her steps slower, her laughter softer but no less bright. Adrian rarely left her side. At night, his hand rested protectively over her belly, as though he could guard both mother and child through sheer will. When labor came, it was long and painful. Adrian waited outside the chamber, helpless and pale, his prayers spoken aloud without shame. When the cry of a newborn finally filled the room, he sank into a chair, weeping openly. Their daughter was placed in his arms, red-faced and furious at the world. He stared at her as though she were a miracle. "Hope," he whispered. "We will call her Hope." Eleanor watched him then and knew that something had finally healed completely. Not erased, but healed. Life did not become perfect after that. It became real. Hope grew into a curious child with her mother's eyes and her father's serious expression. 2 more daughters followed in time. Grace and Faith, each arrival met with both fear and fierce joy. Adrian faced every birth with trembling resolve, but never once did he retreat. Blackwood Manor flourished. The estate prospered not through harsh control, but through care and fairness. Tenants stayed for generations. Children grew strong. The manor became a place of refuge rather than fear. 5 years passed like a gentle dream. One summer afternoon, Eleanor sat beside Adrian on a bench overlooking the rose garden. Their daughters ran ahead, laughter ringing through the warm air as they chased butterflies among the blooms. Adrian's hair had begun to show threads of silver. Eleanor's face bore the soft lines of a woman who had lived deeply and loved fully. They were more beautiful to each other now than they had ever been before. "Do you remember," Eleanor said softly, resting her head against his shoulder, "the day you told me you would never touch me?" Adrian smiled, tightening his arm around her. "I remember a man who believed fear was wisdom." "And now?" she asked. "Now I know that love is not the enemy," he replied. "Fear is." They watched as Hope lifted Faith into her arms so she could see a butterfly more closely. Grace spun until she collapsed into the grass, laughing. Adrian felt gratitude so deep it almost hurt. He thought of the storm, of the night he nearly lost everything, of the woman who had walked into darkness without hesitation to save him. "I owe you my life," he said quietly. Eleanor looked up at him. "You owe me nothing. We saved each other." As the sun dipped low, painting the sky in gold and rose, Blackwood Manor stood strong behind them. No longer a tomb of grief. No longer a place of ghosts. It was a home. And within it lived a man who had learned that love was not a curse to be feared, but a gift to be chosen. A woman who had refused to live as a shadow, and children who ran freely through gardens once abandoned. Fear had nearly destroyed them. Love had saved them. And that choice echoed through every stone, every rose, every laugh that filled the air long after the storm had passed.